Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Bunker Show. And have we got an interesting Bunker Show tonight? We're going to be dealing with some of the one of the hot topics that's around at the moment, which is the war on drugs. And with us in the bunker this evening, here's Lady with the big smile. Here's Helen.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Really looking forward to tonight's show with our guests. And don't forget to join me in the chat room where I can get your questions and feedback live to our guests, and look forward to the show.
And also with us in the bunker this evening is my wingman. Here's Jimmy.
Hi, Fabrice. Hi, Helen. And the operative word is being hi. How's it going, everyone?
Okay. And tonight we've got an interesting guest who's done quite some amazing things in terms of bringing drug awareness to a much wider community. And he's done some great work with the United Patients Alliance. That's Chris Baldwin. Are you with us, Chris?
I am indeed, yeah. Hello there, Fabrice.
Hi, Chris. As I say, you've been quite involved in raising awareness of the sometimes quite hard to understand drug laws in this country, and also the medicinal uses of that. So, Chris, how did you get started, and how would you describe what it is that you do?
Hello, can we stop the phone ringing? Yes. Well, basically, I think, why did I try cannabis in the first place? I think I can answer that in one word, which is the same for everybody, which is curiosity. I first bumped into cannabis in 1968 when I was 18. And it didn't take long, really, before I couldn't understand why the stuff was illegal. And so, over the years, I've spent time and effort working towards trying to make it legal. And I cannot see any reason why, we should be denied such a lovely substance.
It's quite interesting. As you mentioned, it's quite hard to understand why it is illegal when there's been no reported deaths or casualties. Oh. No. And I believe at the last election there was a party called Cannabis is Less Harmful Than Alcohol.
It's called Sister, CIS. Cannabis is safer than alcohol. Yeah, they've just become a friend of mine on Facebook, actually. Yeah, their name's Sister. Clark knows the chap who runs it, actually.
And hopefully we'll be having Clark French on during the show, who's a director and founding member of the UPA.
Yeah. Clark and I had a long phone conversation many years ago, which I actually didn't remember, but he reminded me of. And then we sort of came together in more recent times to sort of work together on this with many others, but Clark and some of his colleagues are doing some very, very good work trying to get cannabis accepted as a medicine. Because there are many, many sort of people who use it as a medicine and rely on it as a medicine.
And there have been many positive reports of people having quite troubling conditions alleviated by the use of cannabis.
Absolutely.
And with political parties now standing, you are one of the pioneers of that, because you've stood for Parliament previously.
I stood for Parliament in 2001 and 2005 for the Legalised Cannabis Alliance, which was then a registered political party. In 2001, I stood in my own constituency of East Worthing and Shoreham and got 920 votes and lost my deposit, of course. And in 2005, I stood again in my own constituency, and because the person that was going to do West Worthing dropped out, the nominating officer, Alan Buffrey of Legalised Cannabis Alliance, asked me to do that. So I got, I think, 670 votes in East Worthing and 550 in West Worthing. So they reckon in the political world that anything above 300 is out of loony land. So I did all right,
And not only that, I mean, did you have the opportunity to go to any hustings, and what sort of response did you get from the more mainstream politicians? Well,
it's very funny because when Tim Lawton, our MP, who I know quite well now through standing against him a couple of times, he actually liked me being in the race, but he totally disagreed with my policy. But because we're a single policy party, legalised cannabis. But the one interesting thing, Fabrice, was that in the beginning, the first hustings I went to was in Shoreham. And when I arrived there was this very nice, I think it was probably the vicar with a beard and shorts and looked a bit like David Bellamy. And when I walked in, he said, "Oh, are you the cannabis chap?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "I hope you brought free samples for everybody," or something like that, with a smile on his face. So I thought that was quite a nice icebreaker and relaxed me a bit, because I was very nervous. At the end of the debate, a lady came up to me wearing a blue rosette, middle-aged lady came up to me wearing a blue rosette. She was never going to vote for me. She was going to vote for Tim. But she shook my hand and said that I'd helped her to see a different side of things. So at that point, I realised that it wasn't so much about votes, but about getting the message out there and making people realise. What I did also at that hustings was I outed my mum. My mum was sitting in the front row, and I said, "How old is the average cannabis smoker? Like 18, 20, 30. I said, "Stand up, Mum." And I said, "Here's my mum. She's in her late 70s. She's not only worked all her life, but she fought for this country in the Second World War. And at night, instead of a glass of sherry or whatever, she likes a little puff. What harm is she doing? And why would society want to persecute her for that?" And it went down very well, you see.
Exactly. Hi, Chris. It's Jimmy here. I was just out of curiosity. I just was wondering on what grounds did Tim Lawton say he disagreed?
Tim Lawton? I don't think he really gave me very much grounds, but he just totally disagreed with it. The trouble is, the big problem is there's been so much bad publicity and false and untrue publicity put out about it that, it's going to take a case of re-educating people to realise that, in my opinion, for a start, I think that cannabis is the most benign drug known to man. Or even if you want to call it a drug, it's a herb. But I think it's a very friendly thing. Obviously, it's like anything. Aspirin doesn't agree with everybody, and it's like cannabis doesn't agree with everybody. I'm not saying that everybody should use cannabis, but only that if it's something that's beneficial to you, I don't see why the government or any individual would want to stop you.
It is very hard to understand why, at least people should have the option to choose what is most appropriate for their well-being.
Yeah.
And it's 2005 was the last time that you stood for Parliament.
I was
going to say now we're.
No, go on. Sorry, carry on, Fabrice.
I was going to say now we're 10 years later. How do you think that has changed in terms of how the conversation generally is with cannabis? Because when I went to school, homosexuality was illegal. When I left school, it was totally legal, and people were free to do what they want. So these things can change in a decade or so.
Exactly. There was a time when women weren't allowed to vote, and even when they were given the vote in the beginning, it was only to women over 30. And then up to 1967, they used to lock men up for being gay, which, where's there any justice in that? So things do change. And the thing is, you have to complain to get it. You have to fight the thing to get it to change. If you just sit there and ignore it, it won't change. It's only when people actually get off their butts and do something about it that life, these things will change.
It seems like there has been a considerable moving forward of the conversation.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who have worked and are working very hard at it. I've mentioned Alan Buffrey. Alan Buffrey is a stalwart in the campaign. And then, of course, there's good old Winston Matthews. He may be listening tonight. I hope he is. Winston Matthews is a man who has been busted so many times and is so defiant that if I have always said that, he was involved with the coffee shop. And in those days, I didn't take long before I nicknamed him Winston the Lionheart. And basically, I've always said that if everybody had the guts that Winston's got, it would have been legalised years ago. Because they just wouldn't have been able to. If we could all be as defiant and as Winston is, then the problem is obviously and I understand it. People are scared of being busted. Some people, it would affect their career or lose them their career. So you understand that people can't always sort of stick their head above the parapet and get it chopped off.
Yeah, that's very true. And and not everybody is in the position and is strong enough in spirit as Winston is to be able to challenge legally, because the ramifications are quite hard. But I know more and more people are taking that step, because they feel that actually if the law is exposed for being an ineffectual and quite frankly a silly law, then it makes it hard to be enforced. Which 3 police chiefs of the county of Durham, Dorset and Surrey have stated that they're not going to actively pursue people who use and grow cannabis for their own personal use, as long as there's no antisocial ramifications from it.
Exactly. And that's how it should be. It's like, the thing is, I have a badge that says no victim, no crime. We have stickers that says no victim, no crime. If there's no victim, how can there be? Where's the crime? If there's no victim, how can there be a crime? And it's as simple as that.
I think Fabrice and I were talking about this the other night, actually, and, technically the only victim in this, or the only supposed victim, is, Her Majesty, isn't it?
Well, the main victim generally, Jimmy, is the person that gets busted. I remember reading something once, and it said it's a book, and it was one chapter said the main danger, the main problem or danger of cannabis, and you open it up, and that chapter says getting busted, and that really is it,
Yeah, well, you're creating criminals out of perfectly peaceful and lawful people.
Exactly. Because I choose to use a bit of cannabis in the privacy of my own home, which, by the way, I also, helps calm my spastic legs. Because I do that instead of choosing to have a glass of beer or a glass of whiskey, it turns me into a potential criminal, which is it's draconian, isn't it? There's no other word for it. It's draconian. It's time the government saw the light, saw things as they really are. And, something I sort of thought up a little while ago was, what about if we were to get a town, any average town, say Worthing, and divide it into 2 halves, east and west, and for 1 month, 3 months, whatever, turn all the pubs into coffee shops, and leave in the other half of the town, leave all the pubs as pubs. And there'd be 3 questions you'd ask at the end of it. Which half of the town gave the police the most work? It would be the pub half. Which half of the town would give the hospital the most work? It would be the pub half. And which half of the town would most police want to work in? The coffee shop half. So there you go.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about dividing a town in half and doing it that way. And I suppose with what's happening in Durham, Dorset and Surrey, that will, to a certain degree, be an experiment with what happens to actualise that. But there have been other countries in Europe, namely Portugal, which has not been treating cannabis use or any drug use as a criminal, but as a medical matter. Yeah. And do you know a little bit about the effect of what's been happening over there?
Yeah, I do, actually, because I saw somebody very close to you today, Fabrice, who lives there. And I was talking to her about it. But basically, there's many countries now that in Europe that have relaxed their cannabis laws. From legalising to decriminalising to turning a blind eye. Because basically, people tend to run away with the idea that it's legal in Holland. It isn't. It's just they simply turn a blind eye to it, and it's known as the grey area. But they have a very sensible attitude to it all out there. And also, if you look at the states now, America, they've about half the states have legalised for medical, and 2 states, namely Colorado and Washington, have legalised recreational. And Colorado have also now reported sort of massive tax receipts from it all. So, it could benefit all of us in many ways if it was legalised.
Well, that's an incredibly interesting thing with Colorado bringing in, and they're quite substantial tax receipts as well. So that could provide, in these times of supposed austerity, that could provide quite an amount of money to help support some of the most vulnerable people.
Well, apart from that, Fabrice, let's say one thing we hear on the news constantly is that the police are overtaxed. They've got too much. They can't cope with what's going on because of the cutbacks and everything. Well, if they was to legalise cannabis and stop knocking innocent people's doors in, that means that they could put their resources into more important things, couldn't they? You know. Yeah. I mean, and also, I mean, another thing that I point out is that the maximum. I know nobody gets it generally, but the maximum permitted sentence for possession of cannabis is 5 years. The maximum for possession of a knife, if you're caught with a knife on the street, is 4 years. And I just don't understand. That just is beyond me. Is that the government thinks that having a bag of weed in your pocket is a worse crime than having a knife in your pocket? It's beyond me.
Well, in your opinion, Chris, where do you think that attitude stems from?
Ignorance, fear. I don't know. It's just stupidity. I've been part of the cannabis community now for 47 years, something like that. And I've never known anyone to sort of hurt anybody because of cannabis. I've never known anyone to really be hurt because of cannabis. So, and I always find that we all get on really well together. So.
I agree entirely. I can attribute a lot of tears to alcohol and various other substances, but all I can attribute to cannabis is big smiles and dopey grins.
Yeah. Well, let's face it. Alcohol is a much stronger drug than cannabis. I mean, I can remember when I was up in Stockport when Colin Davis opened his the first coffee shop in England, in Britain. I was standing at the coffee bar and there was a bloke next to me and he nudged me. And accidentally nudged me, and he turned around, he sort of put his hands up, and he went, "Oh, sorry, mate." And I put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, "Calm down, mate." I said, "This is not a pub, it's a coffee shop. Nobody's going to hit you, And it was like, and that was, his attitude was like, "Oh, sorry, mate, I didn't, because that's what he would have had to do if he was in a pub. But in a coffee shop, you don't get that."
And this kind of leads me back to a point you briefly raised earlier, which is the education, and in Portugal and Spain, I believe, which is where they've decriminalised these things and treat them more as a medical matter. They've been able to issue better, more accurate information about those substances because it appears that I know that when I was working with young people, that a number of them didn't trust, I think it was Talk to Frank, which was the drugs advice line, because the information that they were getting there, just they couldn't trust it because it didn't agree with their own experiences.
In all honesty, I saw a lot of Frank's advice and it was just a load of bollocks. It really, I'm sorry, am I allowed to say bollocks? Well, I did anyway.
If that's what it was, then you're welcome to use the appropriate language.
You're quite right. What you said, basically that was not going to, what they were putting out there was not going to connect with young people at all. And
I noticed it fostered a sort of element of distrust. Yeah. When they were saying that people who take cannabis, could go nuts. And it kind of reminds me of sort of, what's the lethal dose of cannabis? About 10 kilos dropped on your head very hard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a lethal dose. I mean, I've said it before and I said it earlier and I'll say it again. I'm not saying that cannabis is for everybody. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying everybody in the world should be using cannabis. What I'm saying is if cannabis suits you and is beneficial to you in your life, then why should you be denied that beneficial plant? It's as simple as that. Come on, government, get a grip. It's just you're being stupid here.
Well, in what ways do you think, they are being stupid? I mean, we mentioned the legal system and kicking in people's doors. It must cost an awful lot of money to take a legend like Winston and throw him in a human cage for months.
They locked him up for growing his own weed. They locked him up for 6 months for growing his own weed. And the man was, apart from being locked up, he was nearly evicted from his home. This is just... I talk about the punishment outweighing the crime. Of course it does. There's no crime. There wasn't a crime. Why was he punished? There was no crime. Winston's a lovely bloke. He's a sweet man. He's a very intelligent man. He's got a big heart. Why are they hurting this man? He's doing nothing to hurt anybody else.
And that's a real persecution. And let's say if, he nearly lost his home.
Yeah.
Lots of people are concerned about their jobs because some people get tested for substances, and this is why I just wanted to touch on legal highs, because there's a large number of people who are attempting to get sort of synthetic cannabis that mimics, just so that they can get some of the benefits that they would usually get from cannabis, but so that they don't run into problems with testing. And surely, again, in terms of stupid government, isn't that a waste of money?
Well, okay, as a nice bit of advice for anybody, I think you can use this one. You can take this to the bank, which is if you get tested positive for cannabis regarding job or whatever, just simply say that you eat hemp seeds because they replace essential fatty acids. And if you eat hemp seeds, you get tested positive for cannabis. I think that one works. But, that's all I can say. I mean, again, it's like, you get some people come in from work, into work in the morning with a hangover. Well, they're going to be working less efficient, aren't they? But that's all right, because it's legal. It's just ridiculous. Again, anything to do with the illegality of cannabis to me is ridiculous. Like the government to keep this facade going, they're just being heartless. They've got no compassion. There's people many people look at Clark. Clark has got MS. Cannabis helps him. It makes his life bearable, tolerable. It enables him to get through a day. What is wrong with these people? Why are they not allowing Clark to have that?
Well, it's interesting. Just going back to the legal high issue, just for a second. The government seemed to, in their drawing up of their policy, their legislation, they seem to be far more concerned with the emotional responses to certain substances than they were of the actual physical harms. And that kind of leads me to think, if we were to factor out the stupid, illogical side of what the government is doing, then the only option you have left is there's an agenda. Do you have any idea what maybe that agenda could be?
I don't know, but I mean, the only reason legal highs exist is because of prohibition, and it's another example of where prohibition doesn't benefit society; it hurts society. Prohibition hurts society in so many ways. They found that out with alcohol prohibition in the 1920s in America. All it did was create crime, and if cannabis was legalized and regulated, it would just benefit everybody, and that's the end of it.
And we were talking about testing. One of the guys just said that with some of the tests, hemp seeds, because they contain no THC, which is one of the active ingredients in cannabis.
Right.
Some tests it won't be effective for.
Right. I read about a case for a guy in the American Air Force who tested positive for cannabis, and he said that he ate hemp seeds to replace essential fatty acids, and somehow he got away with it. But that's just a case that I read.
But
I might be wrong on that, but I thought it was true. But carry on.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the prohibition and how that doesn't seem to make sense. Do you think that there are interests? I mean, since NATO engaged in Afghanistan, the amount of opium that has come out has risen from 50 tons to nearly 5,000 tons.
I didn't know that. It's an interesting fact. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the other interesting fact, which has more recently come about, is that hashish production, which is solid cannabis resin, in Afghanistan, has recently increased to industrial levels, right, which it hadn't done since the Soviets were in Afghanistan. Right. So, do you think that there are, maybe organisations that are in some way linked in with NATO that are allowing some of the drug prohibition to continue because they're profiting from it in some way?
Well, yeah, there have been certain rumours about the CIA and all that, haven't they? Where they spent more on in one campaign on that than they had for their whole yearly budget, and it was all subsidised with drugs. But I have no absolute proof on that one. I've heard
that was the Iran-Contra affair.
I've heard these rumours, etc., but it's not something that I could substantiate. So I can't. I'd have to pass on that question a bit, really.
But if we were to go on past record, I mean, the CIA have plenty of form as far as the cocaine wars are concerned, and flooding low-income communities with the drug.
We also had a guest on the Bunker just over a month ago by the name of Martin Summers, who was very eloquent and clear about how much drug money was actually being laundered through the City of London. And how that was keeping some of the city institutions afloat. So there may be other issues with prohibition.
Yeah. I mean, I'm convinced as well that prohibition, couple of things that fuels prohibition is the alcohol companies that are very big don't want it legalised recreationally, and the drug companies that are very big don't want it legalised medically because it will take money out of their pockets. And what I'm saying to the government is fuck the money and, excuse me, but, just have a heart, for Christ's sake. Have some compassion. Remember that there are people out here who need it for medical reasons, and it just makes my great example. Many years ago up north, there was a man I knew who he was in his late 60s. He had multiple sclerosis, and both his legs had been amputated. Now, the one thing I would say that he liked to smoke a joint, and if the only thing it did for that man was made life more bearable on a daily basis, what utter bastard would want to take that away from him? I mean, where's their compassion, for Christ's sakes? Yeah.
This is a question from our legend Bob here at Dark City. How would making cannabis legal help?
In what? Where? Sorry, what?
How would making cannabis legal help?
Help who? What, you asking me that?
Generally help individuals, help communities, and help the country as a whole. Okay.
Well, for a start, financially, we've already talked about it. Would put tax money into the coffers. It would also take a lot of pressure off the police in certain areas where they could put those resources into more important things like proper crime. Then also, when I had the coffee shops running, I found that it wasn't just a matter of people buying their cannabis. They wanted to sit down and have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or a Coca-Cola or whatever, or lemonade, and sit and talk to their friends in the coffee shop. And I had disabled clients who used to come in there, and they didn't like going to pubs because they didn't feel safe. But in my coffee shops, they felt safe. It would be like a great sort of social thing, like an alternative to pub life. It would benefit communities in that way. Go on.
I visited your cafe on several occasions, and I have to say the atmosphere was just palpable of how friendly the community and the sharing, and I think that's such an important thing, and it's being denied us, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a wonderful place to be. I look back on it now. I mean, when it was all going on, Jim, I didn't really have time to sort of appreciate it. But when I look back on it now and think, well, yeah, that was quite an amazing thing, really, But also going on from that, how would it benefit? It would obviously, other obvious benefits would be, for people who need it medically. I mean, it makes such. I mean, I heard of a lady that had multiple sclerosis and she'd completely lost bladder control, so she wouldn't go out anywhere. She discovered cannabis. It gave her back her bladder control. It gave her back her dignity. Come on, man, what price? It gave her back her dignity, and she was able to go back out in the world again and live. So if that isn't worth doing, what is?
And that must, that's quite a revelation. I've heard with other people who've also, unfortunately, been affected by multiple sclerosis of the difference that it makes in terms of night and day, and just being able to be in control of your own body.
Well, unfortunately, he had connection problems tonight, but Clark French, he speaks passionately and eloquently about it all. And Clark French, I hope you can, maybe if not, maybe next week if you can get him on, he will talk to you about what difference it makes to a person with multiple sclerosis and what a difference it makes to their lives, and how positive it turns their life. So it turns the negatives into positives, means he can get out and live a proper life. You know, we're all entitled to that.
Well, I mean, this is an interesting sort of conundrum which has recently come up. And in fact, there was an article in the Daily Tory Graph today talking about the European Convention on Human Rights. Yeah. Now, of course, if a cannabis user was living in Portugal, they would be able to take cannabis and be able to be alleviated of their symptoms, whatever they may be. Yeah. But yet, they'll be covered by the same Convention on Human Rights, but yet if they came to this country, they could potentially be a criminal.
Yeah.
And yet, we do have, the right to a full life, a family life.
Exactly.
And I think that they're looking into that. There's a group today who released a report which included Nigel Lawson, now Lord Lawson, Norman Fowler, now Lord Fowler, and even Baroness Manningham Bueller, who was a former Director General of MI5. So there's some quite heavy hitters.
I mean, look, I would ask one question of all 650 MPs, which is, do I not have the right to a quality of life? Do other people not have the right to a quality of life? Do we not have that right to a quality of life? If their answer is no, what the hell are they doing in Parliament?
And if the answer, is yes,
if the answer is yes, then
why are they
why the hell haven't you legalised cannabis? So
I think the question even goes further. The question I'd like to ask the government is, who the hell do you think you are to tell me what I'll put in my body?
Oh yeah, I got that one as well, Jim. Yeah, I've said that before when I've done speeches in places. But what individual or government has the right to tell you or me or anybody what they can or cannot put in their own body? Because as far as I'm concerned, mate, it may not be much, but I own this one. It's mine to do with what I please. So
it doesn't have property of Her Majesty's government stamped anywhere. You haven't sold yourself into slavery while you weren't looking. Glad to hear that.
No.
But yeah, the report, the politicians called for an experimental ethos to move away from prohibition and punishment to achieve a more balanced approach to drug policy. Says imprisonment should be used as a last resort for low-level drug offences, and that there should be robust experiments into decriminalising less harmful drugs such as cannabis, as a number of countries around the world, including 4 US states, move away from prohibition. Yeah. And it also mentioned adopting Dutch-style coffee shops for cannabis sales. Do you think that helps for people who do have disabilities and ailments to have the sort of communities that you're talking about with coffee shops? And actually, for our listeners, Chris, do you think you could tell us a little bit about your history with coffee shops and introducing them into the UK for us?
Well, I went in, let me think now, it would have been 2001, 2002. I know a man called Noel van Schaik he used to own 3 coffee shops in Haarlem, just west of Amsterdam. He might still own 1 or 2, I'm not sure. But anyway, he's also been a great political fighter and a really nice guy. I got on really well with him. And he started running a coffee shop course in Holland, a 5-day course, which was 500 quid. But he very nicely gave me it for nothing. So I spent 5 days doing this coffee shop course in Holland, which included doing work experience, working in the dealer's booth, which I absolutely loved, and also behind the coffee bar. And I came back with all this sort of ringing in my ears, and Noel and his wife Maruska said to me, go home, open a coffee shop, Chris. We're sort of, we've got faith in you. Go home and do it, And so I sort of came home with that all ringing in my ears, and I decided that I'd stood for Parliament. I'd been to many, many rallies and protest marches and done many things, written letters, lobbied MPs, done everything in that respect. So what was the next stage? And I thought, well, I want to push this issue. So the next stage was, as far as I was concerned, was to open a coffee shop, start openly selling cannabis, allow people in to sit and smoke their cannabis and socialise, and prove to society that this was not going to hurt it. And if you look at it, look at Holland, they've had coffee shops now for 40 years and society runs very, very efficiently. All the trains run on time, generally. And so I decided that, to open, and I opened this coffee shop in Rowlands Road. And it wasn't long before there were queues out the door and people queuing up to sit down. There just wasn't enough space. And so I started looking around for other premises, and I opened another one over in Brown Road on the east side of in East Worthing. And I also tried to encourage other people to do it, offering them money to open a coffee shop. I had I was approaching various letting agents and getting deals with them and to open shops in various places and then offering people the keys and the money, but nobody else would take it up. So I was hoping that I could get 5 coffee shops. I only wanted one, really. I was hoping to get 4 other people to open so I could have 5 coffee. If we had 5 coffee shops, I figured in Worthing we had a chance, because when they busted my 2 at the same time, they had to import police from out of town to do that. So if we had 5 coffee shops in town, there would be no way they could bust them all at once. They'd have to have, too many police from different places. And I figured that we had a chance if we could get many, rather than just one coffee shop, which pushed the issue. 5 would make it very, very difficult for them to control. But unfortunately, I never managed to achieve more than 2. But it was good. The whole project lasted for a bit over a year, and it was good while it lasted. Yeah.
Initially, what was the police response to the cafes? Was there some awareness? Was there some sort of leniency?
Right. Well, okay. I got to know a man called Eddie Ellison, who was a senior policeman. He was in the police force for 30 years. And for the last 4 years of his life, he was head of the drug squad at New Scotland Yard. And then he was retired. And he was then unfortunately the man's dead now. He was a lovely man, and he actually was a drug advisor to the government. And I remember asking him. He came up to my second coffee shop to be interviewed by Channel 4, and sometime during the course of things before or after the interview, I was chatting with him, and I said, Eddie, I don't understand what's going on here. I said, the first coffee shop in Stockport was busted 2 hours before it opened. The second one in Bournemouth was busted 3 days after it opened. I said, we went over 5 months before we got busted. How the hell did that happen? And he told me that somewhere in the corridors of power, the local police had been told to keep their eye on the place, and if they need to go in for some reason, go in, but otherwise stand back and just monitor it. And I think that it was that my coffee shops were used as an experiment, to be honest with you. But I have no absolute proof, only the fact that the man who told me that was a very reliable source.
Okay, so a little bit like, as we discussed in that report from the politicians there, that they are looking towards having some of those experimental areas to see if a well-run coffee shop can be functional, or if there are any unexpected fallout from it. Because I believe in Brighton that they were looking towards opening the conversation on that.
At the time when I was running my 2 coffee shops, I met somebody in Brighton. A man came over and introduced himself to me, who was running a private members coffee shop in Brighton. And I went and visited that, and that was really, really nice. He had a fantastic menu, and it was a really nice coffee shop, but it wasn't open to the public as such. It was private members. Do you think that both models are effective, both private members and open to the public? Apparently in Barcelona now they've got coffee shops, but you have to actually sort of become a member to join the coffee shop. So but apparently prices are very good, quality is very good. But you can't just walk in off the street like you can in the Dutch ones. Yeah.
Okay, so very much like private clubs.
Yeah, I've got nothing against that side of it as well, but I was trying to be very open, very overt. Like we actually had a menu on the wall with bags of cannabis on the menu and everything. We had a dealer's booth. We really couldn't have been more open and upfront about it than we were. We had everything that a Dutch coffee shop had except an espresso machine, and eventually, if we'd have been there long enough, we would have got one of them. So, yeah.
And how do you think you mentioned the medical side of it and the community, do you think that that's helpful for them to work out what is, I guess, share their experiences of what works for them and what helps for them and support each other? Do you think that happens?
Yeah, well, before we opened the coffee shop, we were doing a medical supply thing, which was, we had a few local clients, but most of it was going out via the post. And we called that the Herb Connection, which was THC. It was somebody else who dreamed up the name. But anyway, and what we did was in the second coffee shop, we had 3 shops there. And one of the shops was the Herb Connection shop, which was like a little private coffee shop for disabled and sick people. And what we actually managed to do was the profits from the coffee shop, we managed to sell cannabis to the Herb Connection cheaper than we were buying it, or sometimes I even gave it to them. So we were basically, with the Herb Connection, what we were able to do, we were able to supply people who needed it as a medicine, good quality cannabis at sensible prices. But the price, as far as I was concerned, was still too high, on the grounds that basically they should have been getting it free on prescription anyway. So what I did was I ended up subsidising the Herb Connection from the coffee shop. We told everybody who bought in the coffee shop that, you are subsidising medical cannabis, and everybody was quite happy. The prices were still fair, so.
Okay. And what kind of difference does that make for people to have that kind of support and that kind of service available to them? Obviously, with MS, you're not the most mobile person.
Right. Okay, Joe, it's a really good question, because apart from having something that was assured quality at a sensible price and also being assured regular supply, but also people didn't have to sort of deal with dodgy dealers who were going to rip them off or sell them crap. One particular guy, I remember when the election leaflets went out, one guy I know in a wheelchair, he phoned me up and I went round to see him, and he'd just given some money to a guy for half an ounce, and the guy had gone off and not come back with it. Guy in a wheelchair had just ripped him off with half an ounce. So I gave him some weed, and I remember him rolling this joint and smoking it and saying to me, he was rubbing his legs and saying, "Oh, mate," he said, "my legs haven't felt this good for ages." And, that's, again, I can't, listen to these stories. If there's any MPs listening to this, listen to these stories. Have some compassion. Get off your asses and do something about it. Stop it. Stop denying people their medicine.
I think that's a really essential message to get out, and I think the more people can have a forum to have a conversation, so that people who often aren't aware of the difference it can make to somebody's life are aware and can actually see that this war on some drugs is actually creating victims of war casualties, collateral damage.
The war on drugs, Fabrice, is a war on people. It's a war on the people who use drugs. And, I know personally, I know so many people who use cannabis as a medicine, and it helps them for pain, for spasms, for all sorts of reasons. But mainly for the main one really is easing the pain. When you're in pain, you do anything to get out of pain, and to criminalise someone for trying to sort of stay out of pain and live a normal life, what can I say?
Medically and socially, it's not logical, is it? Because as soon as you start demonising a certain aspect of medicine, then you're blocking yourself off from vital scientific research and vital social research. So it's criminal in itself to criminalise.
Yep, absolutely, Jim. It's why are they doing this? I still to this day don't understand. My campaigning goes back a long, long way now, and I will carry on and continue to campaign until they get a grip and do something about it.
Well, it's really inspiring to hear. As you say, when you've lobbied your MPs and you've applied pressure in different areas, and then you go out and demonstrate it, and to still have the persistence to do that, because
well, I have to say at this point, I had actually got to the point where a little while ago I got to the point where I felt like I was just banging my head against the brick wall and it hurt, and I'd kind of dropped into semi-retirement. And then I met Clark and his friends, and Clark and his friends kind of inspired me to get back off my bum and do something about it again. And, I think, to be honest, I've got to give Clark a lot of credit for inspiring me to sort of come out of semi-retirement, really. So.
Okay, and that's Clark French, and he's the director and one of the founding members of the United Patients Alliance. So, Chris, could you tell some of our listeners sort of some of the links and maybe some of the best places that they can go to help support changes?
Every month, the United Patients Alliance has a monthly admin meeting in Brighton. All are welcome. It's held at the meeting house, which is the Quaker Meeting House in Ship Street, just down, partway down Ship Street on the left. If you're going down Ship Street towards the sea, it's just on the left as the corner turns.
Right in the middle of Brighton. It's an easy place to get to and a lovely venue. It's
a lovely place. There's some nice restaurants around and all that sort of thing if you want to eat as well. But we have a weekly meeting, and a monthly meeting, and also there are other events, various events around the country. We're going to be putting one on in Worthing soon, a little event with speakers and various things going on. I think that will be also at the meeting house in Worthing. But if you go on the website, the United Patients Alliance website, I think the meetings, hopefully everything should be advertised on there. So that's the best advice I can give for anyone. If you go onto the website as well, if you want to contact anyone in the UPA, I guess you can do that through there. But the UPA has been formed to help and support people who need medical cannabis. It's there for that purpose and that purpose only. And
that's brilliant, Chris. Thanks ever so much for providing that link. Yeah. We've also got lovely Sarah, who's got a couple of bits to add. Are you there, Sarah?
Yeah, hello, Chris. I'm the rep for Yorkshire for the United Patients Alliance.
Hello, Sarah.
How you doing? You right?
I'm fine, thank you, my love. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever spoke to you before, so I just wanted to mention on that point that the Yorkshire team meet up once a month as well, and we have really regular admin meetings. In fact, we had one last night, and it was a really good meeting that we had last night. And I'm actually working on at the moment getting a good solid ground team so that Yorkshire's got a good team. I'm looking to put people in different roles, so that we can further the progress of the UPA a lot more up north. I just wanted to say that we do a lot up here as well.
That's brilliant, Sarah. That's brilliant. Yeah. By the way, our meetings are usually on a Wednesday night. I can't remember when the next one is. No.
So it'll be worthwhile for people to contact the UPA and see what's going on in their region, because the campaigns for moving the conversation forward on this subject really seem to be gathering pace. So do you think
it's really good that Sarah has contacted as well, because one of the things I did forget to point out, which is Clark has done a lot of work. Clark and his colleagues have done a lot of work to make sure that there are as many branches of UPA around the country. So Sarah's in Yorkshire, we're down here in Sussex, and and right the way up the country there are various branches of the UPA. So basically there are people that hopefully there should be somebody local to you that you can get in touch with.
There's also lots of local groups as well. I've got the United Patients Alliance Yorkshire, and all our activities go in there. And it is purely only for activities that the Yorkshire group do, so there's no post saying what's happening in the world of cannabis. It's purely for the Yorkshire activity. So if you are in the region, have a look and join that one. And there's also ones in other regions. There's groups for Wales, there's groups for the Southwest. So find a group in your local area. Ask what you can do within that local group as well. And you've got, and there's more chances of you being able to get involved. We're always looking out for people on the ground, really, in the UPA, and to do these things. More foot soldiers are always needed.
Yeah, well said, Sarah. And that would apply to all the branches of the UPA. We're always looking for more people to come on board. The more we get, the stronger we're going to be.
And judging from what I've seen of some of the events that you have, you all seem like you have a jolly good time, as well as doing something really vital for the community and the people who really rely on that support.
If you come to any UPA meeting, mate, you will meet absolutely lovely, friendly people, guaranteed.
One other thing that I kind of caught a little bit of recently, just as we go into the home stretch, was guerrilla seed dropping, I think.
Never heard of it. What's this?
Feed the Birds campaign, I think.
Feed the Birds, yeah, Feed the Birds, yeah.
Which is to encourage wild cannabis to grow.
They give hemp
what do you think of that?
They give bags of hemp seeds away. So, I chucked a few around town a little while ago.
And do you think that's an interesting way for people to get involved?
Every little helps, Fabrice. I think every little. I mean, the thing is, the UPA have also linked up with one or two other bodies as well. Because I think it's one of the problems back with the Legalised Cannabis Alliance was it ended up where there were the group kind of splintered a bit. And it really needs for us all to be sort of marching in the same direction, singing from that same hymn sheet, however you want to put it,
It's interesting you should bring that up, Chris, because we've spoken a bit before on the Bunker Show about how the fracking movement works by having lots of local groups that are very, very driven towards their own areas who can come together regionally or even nationally if required. And from what you and Sarah have been saying, that it seems like the United Patients Alliance and the conversation on cannabis is functioning in the same way, because when organisations get too centralised, it is possible for splits and divisiveness and those type of things to happen. And did you find that people were getting distracted from what they were supposed to be doing and involving personal attacks and
what with the LCA?
Yes.
There were. Unfortunately, I mean, it's difficult. In any political party, you're going to have people who are going to have disagreements on things. But I don't quite know what happened with the LCA. It was not just it was the LCA, and there were other groups, and they all everybody seemed to end up just sort of fighting all the time, and it meant obviously that it was going to make life very difficult.
And I think that's the advantage of having smaller local groups where people do have more personal relationships and can build up in that way, as well as having good fun and, as you said, meeting good people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always found that any cannabis event I've ever been to, it's just, I mean, look, you take a look at any cannabis march. Look at how the police are dressed. Are they in riot gear? No. They're in shirt sleeves. They're smiling. There's no need. No, they don't. They're not really even needed. We're a very well behaved bunch. Basically, the only law we break is cannabis law, and if you legalise it, we'll be very law abiding citizens.
Yeah, and probably providing a lot of tax revenue as well for the Treasury coffers, as it seems
absolutely.
That's what they really care about these days.
Yeah.
We're just getting to the end of the show, and
I just had some feedback for you, Chris, from the chat room. We got a friend of yours, Sarah, in the chat room, who says that your cafes were brilliant, one of the best years in Worthing, to send you her love and tell you she misses you. Bongcuffa and Quantum Leaf were excellent with very good prices. So I just thought I'd pass you that feedback on.
Thank you very much. It's always very nice to hear things like that. Thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah.
And I think Jimmy wants to say a little something before we sign out the bunker.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Yeah, and I just wanted to thank you for being such a warrior, because your cafes were a little ray of hope in an otherwise dreary seaside town. So lots of love to you, and keep on fighting. You're kind of like our answer to Tommy Chong.
Well, actually, to be honest, mate, I'm not as big. The biggest warrior I know is Winston. I can't help it. I've got to say it. There's nobody with a heart or a set of balls as bigger than him, and that's that. But thank you for saying that anyway, Jim.
Hey, well, we're just about finished up here on the Bunker Show, but if you want to talk cannabis some more, they've got the Dark City Cannabis Compassion Club, and they've got a great show this evening, and there'll be some great people on the panel. They've got Terry Joyce, who's worked as a cannabis activist and is known as the Hollywood Hempstress, a stand-up comic. So that's going to be great to welcome her to the panel. We've got Max Steele show afterwards. I'd like to thank Sarah for joining us in the bunker. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much. I've had a really great time. Thank you very much, everybody. I've loved it.
Thanks, everyone. Good night. Stay on for the Dark City Cannabis Show.
Yeah, good night, everyone. And as far as the government telling us what to do, I'm not having pedophile protectors or warmongers telling me what I can or cannot smoke.